If the author keeps it up, the current Succession War arc will end up being by far and away the best arc in all of Hunter x Hunter. One such reason is because of the ongoing dynamic between Chrollo and Hisoka being one of the most captivating parts of the series while also having immense potential. They foil one another through their contrasting views on destiny. The end of the Yorknu arc exemplifies this. After Chrollo loses his Nen and the prophecies foretold by Neon's stolen ability become subverted, Hisoka remarks on how fate is susceptible to the decisions of people. On the other hand, the first thing Chrollo does after losing his sense of direction is to rely on a prophecy. This gives me the impression that Chrollo in general latches onto destiny as a result of him feeling empty and directionless. He's largely fatalistic despite a small part of him being interested in rebelling against this through his interest in Neon, whereas Hisoka is an agent of death who molds destiny. If you're interested in the idea of Hisoka shaping destiny, I recommend checking out a very nice thread I have linked in the description. A lot of what I just described is merely the groundwork for this video. It's largely accepted within the discourse about the series, so I don't feel the need to delve deep into my reasoning here. It would certainly enrich your enjoyment of the series after noticing how many little details demonstrate these characters' mentalities, but that's not what I'm here for. I instead want to integrate our understanding of these characters into the current arc, since I think it would really illuminate what's going on as well as the direction these characters are heading towards. For example, the Chrollo vs Hisoka fight is a battle between two differing ideologies, fatalism versus fate shapingism. However, what this battle does for Chrollo is reinforce his ideology further. Not only does he defeat his antithesis, but he does so by laying out Hisoka's future in front of him in a way that parallels when Chrollo received prophecies from Ghost Rider. Except this time, the prophecy comes true. Hisoka naturally attempts to resist this future, but he still succumbs to it. This would only strengthen Chrollo's fatalism in his mind. However, while Chrollo's fatalism strengthens, so does Hisoka's power over destiny. He defies the ultimate fate by literally undoing his death, and then he rubs salt in Chrollo's wound by making Neon's prophecies come true and killing Shalnark and Kortopi. Besides also being the ultimate expression of Hisoka shaping fate, these killings are interesting because they have a very artistically cruel nature to them, just like how Sarasa was killed during Chrollo's backstory. Part of the reason why Chrollo is so enraged at their deaths is likely because they evoked the same trauma that Sarasa's death did. However, this also tells us that Hisoka is very similar to Sarasa's killers. Perhaps another reason why Chrollo took interest in Hisoka was subconsciously due to the fact that Hisoka evokes the same kind of chaotic and senseless energy as whoever kills Sarasa, so Chrollo seeks to understand the kind of person who would do such an act. However, what's particularly interesting is what many people have pointed out, which is that the artistry of Sarasa's death is just like how Tsurayane kills for the sake of creating quote-unquote art. If we connect this to Hisoka killing the troop members, that means Hisoka and Seri also parallel. Hisoka defies fate, as we've gone over, but Seri literally defies fate through his Nen ability, allowing him to see into the future and make alterations. Both characters are paralleled in their senseless and cruel killing supposedly resembling art, and both characters defy fate. We can surmise that from Chrollo's point of view, senseless cruelty and shaping fate are part of the same package. Chrollo's interest in Hisoka's nature resembling that of Sarasa's killers is the exact same as his interest in Hisoka not submitting to destiny. If I had to guess why Chrollo thought this way, it would probably be because someone acting cruelly and without reason makes them step out of any roles that the universe has set for them. By lacking any concrete rationale, they are less susceptible to becoming pieces on a board. This is actually pretty stupid in my opinion, but I'm just sharing what I think is Chrollo's thought process on the matter. The thought process can help contextualize why a part of him seeks to rebel against fate. The cruelty of murdering Sarasa transcended any rhyme or reason, and thus the killers defied destiny. This defiance made him feel powerless, and as such, in order to regain that power for himself, part of him looks for ways to work against what the universe has set out for him, just as Sarasa's killers did. Their actions were a tremendous expression of power. We can use this to extrapolate more insight into why Chrollo has so much trouble figuring himself out. While he has largely accepted a more fatalistic point of view, the part of him that wants to avoid feeling like the powerless boy in Meteor City subconsciously prevents him from properly articulating his motives. The more of a nebulous figure he is, the more similar he is to someone like Hisoka or Seri, and the less he submits to fate. Back in Yorknu, Gon asks how Chrollo can bring himself to murder random people, and he cannot give an answer. But what's interesting to note is that Chrollo is able to answer this question during his fight with Hisoka by acknowledging that he sees people as worthless puppets. His improved ability to articulate his answer to Gon's question appears to stem from his desire to rebel against fate, shrinking in between Yorknu and Succession War. After all, he did end up benefiting by following Neon's prophecy and heading east, and he also looked certain in his game plan against Hisoka. The key to him figuring out his motives lies in him vanquishing the side of him that wants to rebel against destiny, the side of him that's insecure of his power. However, his admittance that he views people as puppets is incredibly revealing for other reasons too. tattoo. It shows us that he shares the same viewpoint on corpses as Meteor City's elders. This is a stark contrast to Chrollo as a child who valued Sarasa's corpse and treated it with respect. We see the side of him manifest through Machi, who still respects corpses, as we see through her attempting to fix up Hisoka's corpse out of courtesy. Her Nen ability is an expression of her respect for corpses, so it makes sense that she'd retain the same views as her child self. In fact, we even see in the Yorkno arc that she was on the team of saving Chrollo even against his wishes. Perfectly tracks that she values Chrollo as a friend rather than as a leader, while also retaining the same values Chrollo had before he hollowed out. She's very similar to Pakunoda in that sense. This goes to show the contrast between the Chrollo who is much more pure and the Chrollo who adopted the view of the elders. This is ironic because his aesthetics seem like an attempt to spite the elders. He dons Luciferian aesthetics with a very edgy last name and a tattoo that resembles a cross, as well as a jacket with an upside down cross. This seems like a rejection of the church that the elders ran. Chrollo's actions were also rebellions against the elders, since it was the troop who made the mafia disassociate from Meteor City. This doesn't stop at the elders though. Remember that Lucilfer rebelled against the Abrahamic God, who sets a preordained destiny for everyone. By taking on these aesthetics, Chrollo is trying to symbolically rebel against God, aka rebel against destiny. It's very likely that the Meteor City elders serve as stand-ins for God from Chrollo's point of view. They have power over the city and are thus responsible for a lot of his drama, whether indirectly through the partnership with the mafia or directly through the possible implication that they orchestrated Sarasa's death. In that sense, Chrollo's opposition to the elders is a symbolic extension of his attempt to take control of destiny. Yet, he adopts the same views on corpses as the elders. In trying to rebel against destiny, he embodies the same views as those who represent destiny. This is a microcosm of how conflicted he feels about fatalism in general. This is also represented through the inverted cross. Now, when I noticed how much his aesthetics clashed against the elders, I had some doubt. After all, the inverted cross is St. Peter's cross, which does not really represent the Antichrist. It actually represents St. Peter, a God-fearing man who requested his crucifixion be upside down as a call for people to follow the path of Jesus. However, I cast this aside because the upside down cross representing the Antichrist is the common understanding of the symbol, so that's likely how Chrollo interpreted it and how the readers were expected to interpret it. But then I decided to take note of when he shows the cross tattoo on his forehead. I recognize the tattoo resembles the Vajra from Buddhism, but considering Chrollo's fondness for Christian aesthetics, I'm inclined to believe this also represents the cross, and the cross being darkened is likely because it's supposed to connect to the upside down cross on his jacket. And funnily enough, we see this cross covered up as he tries to gain power over destiny when reading Neon's fortune. The symbol that is supposed to represent rebellion is covered as he is trying to rebel against fate. He even has his St. Peter's jacket off during the scene. But then later on, as he vows to kill Hisoka, he reveals the cross and also wears the St. Peter's jacket. This is funny because him going against Hisoka at this point in time is an expression of his fatalistic ideology. Chrollo associates destiny and fatalism with the Abrahamic God, so it's like the St. Peter's symbol is kind of being used for its original purpose of submission to God, meaning from Chrollo's point of view that would be submission to destiny. Chrollo is not as much of an edgelord as he thinks he is. He consciously uses these symbols to rebel against fate, but they unconsciously end up being used to represent his more fatalistic side. This encapsulates what's going on between him and the elders pretty well. Moving away from this loser for a bit, another crucial motif throughout the series is nature, and this may or may not be a long shot, but I get the impression that nature is actually supposed to represent destiny. Personally, when I think of nature, I think of something fixed, just creatures acting on instinct. You can argue human behavior isn't any less fixed, and while that's valid, I don't think Hunter x Hunter agrees with that viewpoint. First off, there is Meruem. His whole arc was about how he was destined to become king, but he gained more humanity and eventually carved his own path via human interaction. Nature set him on the path to become king, but humanity made him stray from that path. Similarly, you can look at Killua. He's often presented as a cat. Even when he's scared and avoidant, he shows more feline type characteristics. This is fitting because Killua's arc is about overcoming the destiny his family set for him. His animal-like instinct to avoid situations is part of his family's conditioning, part of his destiny. Of course, he overcomes this. Finally, we have Gon. The Chimera Ant arc emphasizes how much of these beasts value strength. To me, this implies that Gon basing his worth as a hunter and thus as a human on strength at least partially stems from his upbringing in nature. He adopted his worldview from an environment that stressed the importance of the survival of the fittest. We especially see this through Ramot. He becomes more individualistic and human-like, but he reverts back into his more ant-like nature when he faces Pito's strength. This worship of strength parallels Gon's idolization, no, objectification of Kite's strength, which was the crux of his whole conflict in Chimera Ant. He eventually overcomes this, but what's interesting is that this coincides with him losing his Nen. Nen is a life force that transcends time. It can be used to predict the future, whether through Neon's prophecies or by knowing how much future potential Gon has. Him losing what made him in tune with destiny correlated with him overcoming his more animalistic worldviews and objectification of strength. These three examples all emphasize how nature represents destiny and humanity represents the ability to break out of it, or at least shape it. It's cool because Chrollo is a foil to Gon in this sense. Gon carves his own destiny despite coming from an island full of nature, whereas Chrollo submits to destiny despite coming from a barren land with no nature. And this characterization of destiny being nature is relevant to current events because Dark Continent is basically nature but on steroids. Chrollo is fighting for fatalism against someone who defies fate, while inadvertently helping another person who defies fate, while heading to the literal embodiment of fate itself. The potential in this one plotline alone is unmatched, and I'm unbelievably excited. Let me know your predictions for the series in the comment section down below, and thanks for watching.